Hey guys, today we're doing a photo comparison with the base models of the Galaxy S24 and the Pixel 8. I've been using Samsung for a while and mostly know what to expect from the camera, while the Pixel 8 is completely new to me. So I wanted to compare the two cameras and see what the differences are. And there are big differences. I'll summarize my findings at the end. So let's dive in. And we're starting off with the main cameras. Instantly, we can see that the S24 is more vibrant, especially comparing the yellow flowers. What's interesting here is that the S24 has an overall more warmer tone versus the cooler tone on the Pixel 8. Punching into the clock, we can see the difference in exposure, with the S24 exposing a little bit more to give that gold ring the extra shine. Moving on, we can see the S24's warmer tone and vibrancy appear again. We can see the warm tone, especially around the white area of Stadium 1, and the vibrancy in the TV and flowers. Next up, we have a butterfly on stilts. Immediately, there's a noticeable difference in the tones again, in addition to a bit more contrast on the S24. Punching in, I can see that the model's face and costume is better exposed on the Pixel 8, while the S24 is exposing the highlights a lot more. Now time for some close-ups on the main camera. This is part of a railing on a walking bridge, and I thought this wood grain looked interesting. Both are looking sharp, but the S24 has a bit more sharpening applied if you look at the texture at the bottom. The Pixel 8 has slightly creamier bokeh in the background. Punching in a bit, we can see a little bit more of that sharpening on the S24. But I think the softer sharpening on the Pixel looks a bit more pleasing to the eye. Next up, we have a colorful box of macarons. We can really see how much the S24 is pushing the saturation here, and it doesn't look good. And because of that, some of the colors are off. Specifically the white macarons, where it's a white on the Pixel 8 and beige on the S24. Okay, this one is really interesting because we've already seen that the S24 favors warmer tones. But looking at these shots, it looks like the S24 removed all that yellow tone here. For context, this is in a room full of wood and warm lights. In terms of the close-up shot, both did very well here, but I think it's the Pixel 8 that did better here with the exposure and background separation. In this set, we can clearly see the S24 overexposing the shot where it's lost a lot of the details and shadows in the sculpture. Looking a bit closer, we can see more of what was lost. Some of the details around the eyelid and eyebrows. Not only that, the whites are a little bit too white on the S24. The Pixel 8 did a lot better here to preserve more of the details. And we've got one more close-up shot. While the Pixel 8 does have a macro mode, I didn't use it for this shot or any of the previous shots since the S24 didn't have one. So we can see how much more saturated everything here is on the S24. The flower is looking more fuchsia than pink. Punching in, both look very sharp, but because of the heavy saturation, the S24 looks like a different flower with darker details than it really had. Rounding off the main camera are a couple of portrait mode shots. Here, both did well in separating the background, but I think it's the Pixel 8 with the most pleasing background blur with how much it softened the background objects. The S24 brightened the shot as usual, which shows my face better, but I think the main issue here is that strong yellow tone in the overall shot again. One more portrait shot. Here, the Pixel 8 didn't get as much background blur, but it's still an overall great shot with good depth. On the S24, while I do like how much background separation there is, I think it's a little bit too much, to where it looks more artificial. Now let's move over to some night shots. It's just after sunset here, and all the lights have come on in this plaza. Both cameras did very well to expose everything, especially the images on the TVs. But the S24 is a lot brighter here with all the lights around the plaza and the building in the back. While I do like the light balance on the Pixel 8, I think the S24 gives a more desirable night shot with better highlights. In this set, we can see the major difference in the tones. The Pixel 8 has more of a blue tone. which can be seen in the sky and the water reflections, while the S24 went heavier on a yellow tone in the lights around the buildings. I will say that the S24 is showing a bit more vibrancy than it really was. In this sunset shot, we have a big color difference. But first, we can already see that the Pixel 8 is much better exposed. From what I remember, the Pixel 8 captured the colors more accurately here because I don't remember looking at this fountain and sunset with that much yellow. In the shot of the bike, I was really surprised with both cameras as I was not expecting to get a good shot because it was so dark. I can see the S24 is pulling up the highlights again, which isn't a bad thing for this shot. Looking closer at the bike and the metal bar, the Pixel 8 was able to get a sharper shot and better contrast on the blacks. In this close-up shot of a pipe at night, the S24 is a lot brighter overall, but it's not to say that the Pixel 8 didn't capture it well. In fact, the Pixel 8 has a smoother background blur, which makes the pipe stand out more. Punching in, we can see that the S24 is a lot noisier, while the Pixel 8 shows little to no noise and is a lot smoother. Even though it's a little bit darker, I prefer the Pixel 8, mainly because of how well it did on the background blur. Moving on to Ultrawide. In this set, we are inside a mansion with a lot of brown going on. I was expecting the S24 to pick up more of a yellow tone, but it was actually the Pixel 8 that did that instead. And the S24 is a lot wider for some reason. Just check out the ceiling. If we punch into the chandelier, we can see that the Pixel 8 did much better in the highlights of the chandelier and did better in not overexposing the lights. In this shot, both did amazingly well to capture all the details of the interior architecture, especially in the ceiling. The only real obvious difference here is a bit of a warmer tone on the S24, which I actually think works better in this shot. Punching in all the way to the art in the back, it looks like the S24 was able to get slightly more details and an overall sharper photo, while the Pixel 8 did better on some of the shadows in the ceiling, but had an overall blurrier photo. In this set, we can immediately see that the Pixel 8 has a much brighter photo and not overexposed, while the S24 is a bit darker and more contrasty. Some of the differences that stood out to me were the red tiles in the Pixel 8 versus the more brown looking ones in the S24, which wasn't what I remembered them as. Now let's get into the Ultrawide Night shots. Here we can see how different each of the cameras approached the exposure and color. Off the bat, the Pixel 8 looks much better exposed. The S24 wasn't too far off, but the contrast is a bit off with the blacks being a bit gray. There was a bright yellow lamp right behind me, and the Pixel 8 was able to capture those yellows, whereas it looks like the S24 removed a lot of the yellow. In this shot, I was at a very dimly lit restaurant. Although it doesn't look like it in the photos, it was basically just the kitchen lights and some candles on the counter. Surprisingly, the Pixel 8 did a lot better in capturing more light since I was expecting that from the S24. However, in terms of the overall photo, I think the S24 was able to capture the dark environment more accurately. In this set, we have dedicated night mode shots from each of the cameras. The Pixel 8 is overall brighter, maybe a little bit too bright when compared to the S24, which I think has an overall better tone and preserves the shadows better in this shot. Punching in, we can see that both are very sharp, but I think the S24 has a slight edge if we compare the lettering on the signs. And over on the other side, we can see that the S24 was actually able to capture the outline of the lamppost instead of just a light flare on the Pixel 8. And one more night mode shot here. I think both cameras did extremely well here, with just some differences in color tones. So we're gonna have to punch in on this one to see if there are more differences. And it looks like the S24 is a lot sharper. Interestingly, the grass in the background of the Pixel 8 is a lot more blurred, whereas on the S24, I can still see the individual grass blades. Okay, now let's get into some zoom action. So we know that the Pixel 8 doesn't have a telephoto lens, while the S24 has a dedicated 10 megapixel telephoto. Can we even compare the two? Let's do it anyway. So here we're at the tennis stadium and we're starting at the main camera, or 1x. Let's zoom in. Here we're looking at both cameras at 8x, which is the max for the Pixel 8. We can see that the S24 is still very sharp here, and the Pixel 8 not so much. If we punch into this 8x, we can really see how much the Pixel 8 falls short. Here we're at target practice again, starting at 1x. Zooming in at 3x, the Pixel 8 starts to wash out a little bit and apply extra sharpening, while the S24 still looks very clean with good shadows and detail. Zooming into 8x, both targets still look very clear, but the Pixel 8 lost a lot of grass detail. Scaling to 133%, we can now see how much detail and sharpness the Pixel 8 lost, especially with the tree in the back. One final zoom comparison. Starting at the 8x max for Pixel 8, we can really see how much sharper the S24 is. The Pixel is still giving us a respectable shot, but let's take a closer look. And we can see that the Pixel 8 just can't compare with the S24 in zoom. And now for the selfies from the front cameras. In this shot of myself, the S24 is looking a bit washed out and overexposed in some areas, especially with the trees in the background, while the Pixel 8 had a more balanced exposure and color tone. In this shot, I'm getting some harsh sunlight on my face, and we can see that the Pixel 8 is a lot softer on the shadows, while the S24 increases the highlights and has darker shadows. Here a bit later in the afternoon, where the sun wasn't as bright, the S24 makes it look like it's the morning with my skin looking much whiter, while the Pixel 8 accurately captures more of the yellow tone on my skin as the sun is going down. And we can't forget about those portrait shots. Both cameras did well to separate the background, but I think there's one clear winner here. The Pixel 8 has a more balanced contrast in addition to softer sharpening, while the S24 is a bit brighter and wider with more sharpening applied. And one more portrait shot for good measure. Here it looks like the Pixel 8 had a little trouble separating the seatbelt with the background, while the S24 was able to manage it perfectly. The Pixel 8 is looking overall a bit too soft here. The S24's sharpness and highlights look a lot better for this shot. And lastly, each of the cameras handle night selfies a bit differently. The S24 tries to get as much light as possible to expose the face better, while the Pixel 8 keeps an even balance of exposure and shadow. Okay guys, let's wrap this up with a summary of the differences I found, starting with the Pixel 8. The biggest difference I found is the great white balance and exposure, especially during extreme light and low light conditions. I saw better color tone and accuracy, but it is on the cooler side. Softer sharpening all around, a nicer background blur thanks to the wider aperture, great balanced night exposure, and a decent digital zoom for having no telephoto lens. For the Galaxy S24, it was a hit or miss for the white balance and exposure. It also greatly enhanced warmer colors with added vibrancy and saturation. There's always extra sharpening, night shots are brighter but noisy, and it has a good telephoto lens with great sharpness. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.